So, hello everyone. Can you believe a whole week has passed? If you're new, welcome, and if not, welcome back. It's time for another Arty class hosted by Shopkeep Arty, the online shop platform used by artists, galleries, schools, and communities to showcase and sell their originals, prints, or online workshops. Contact us via our website or check out YouTube channel for more information. As most of you will know, our free weekly Arty classes feature award-winning artists from around the world every Tuesday at 2 o'clock UK time. On Thursdays, we host special Arty classes and other great events. If you want to join in, these normally cost £5, just £5 or $6.50 if we try and convert it into US dollars per class. Or if you're one of our patrons, you can join them for free and access the recording of these classes afterwards. Becoming our patron not only supports us, but it costs as little as £5 or $6.50 per month and gives you access to all these special classes as well as loads of other benefits. So it's by far the best value option. So I would urge you to go and research that. While we're on the subject of patrons, today we get the chance to press our button of thanks, which is behind me, that recognizes new patrons to our platform. So let me just get ready and I'll press the button. There we go. So we've got, we're saying hello to Kathy Klug, Chris Morrison, Lynn Crisp, Carl Jacob, Deborah Hurst, Kat Jones, and Catherine Fortune. Great surname, that, Catherine Fortune. So thank you, everyone, for supporting us. It really does help us to maintain what we're doing and bringing amazing artists to you free every Tuesday from around the world. So thank you again. Let me try and switch that off. There we go. Oh, it's brilliant, that button. I love it. Welcome to our Tuesday 45-minute paint-along Arty class, which is intended to basically allow you to have a bit of creative inspiration, a bit of a burst of inspiration for 45 minutes. And it also acts as a bit of an introduction to the featured artist's longer workshop, which is about 2 to 3 hours in length, which will be coming up in the coming weeks. So if you haven't already guessed it, today we are welcoming Grahame Booth from Northern Ireland, and Grahame paints only in watercolor, and his success in the mediums reflected in the numerous national and international exhibition awards he's won over many years. He's produced 2 painting DVDs, and he's written 3 books on watercolor techniques, as well as contributing to many others. Each year he travels the world teaching watercolor workshops, although probably not so much in 2020, I would imagine. As always, Grahame and I can't see or hear you, so ideally, please type your question in the Q&A section, as I said a bit earlier, and then I can relay that to Grahame as and when the time suits. If you do want to ask a question directly, you can press on the hand, and I can see Eliza has got her hand up at the moment, and then I can invite you in if you need to have that chat. But we do have a very limited time frame, and we do have hundreds watching. So if you can keep it brief, it's probably better that you write a message within the Arty class. Workshops are a bit different. We have a lot more time and everything, so we try and encourage you to get a lot more involved and everything. If you are watching on YouTube, there is a bit of a delay, but you can type a message and I'll do my best to also put that to Grahame. Finally, we'll stop around halfway and I'll ask Grahame just to outline what he intends to do in his 2 to 3 hour workshop, which is coming up soon, I think on the 1st of December. But for now, it's time to hand over to Grahame. Hello, Grahame.
Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. You're very welcome. I was going to say good afternoon, but it should be good morning and probably good evening for some of you as well. But you're all very welcome. This little workshop is by way of sort of an introduction to the main workshop that I'll talk about a little bit later on. And that's really about trees and the landscape. It's not really about trees per se, but how we use trees and how we make them part of the landscape, as opposed to maybe dominating a landscape. And today, I'm going to really sort of do not much more than a few exercises. We only have 45 minutes, so we don't have a lot of time. And the exercises are going to be based on this subject, which is quite near to where I live. It's a place called Castle Espy. It's a wetlands centre, but I've really chosen this just because of the trees. And I'm going to start, I haven't drawn it yet, and I want to show you me drawing it, because I think the first mistake a lot of people make when they're dealing with trees is that they draw detailed trees, and then they draw or they paint detailed trees, and then they're surprised when they suddenly find their trees are far too detailed in the final painting. So what I'm going to do, I'll get back to the paper, and I'm going to just very roughly draw in. So we have a distant shore, so nice horizontal line for the water line, for the horizon, and then we've got the hills and the distant shore. And I'm going to have some conifers on that distant shore, because they're quite good they're quite fun to paint. Make it a little bit bigger just to give us a little bit more room. And then we have a little bit of water, and then we have the sort of foreground area. And this is where I'm going to have most of the trees. Now, literally, when I'm drawing trees, I'll just get this little bit of land in, a little bit of water there. The rest is all land. When I'm drawing trees, if you look at that one, on the left, for example, oh, wrong one. Let's see. If you look at that one on the left, you'll see that it's quite intricate. We've got all those spindly branches. The one on the next to that is covered in ivy, so it's slightly slightly less detailed, I suppose. But if we go back, literally, I don't do any of that. All I'm going to do is just a simple indication of where my tree is, and that's really all that I'm going to do.
Graham, Diane said, is it possible that you could just make your markings a little bit darker, just so that she
I'll do that. Yes, I realize they're probably a little bit pale. So with this tree here, literally the trunk goes up, it goes up to about here, and every branch comes out from that main center trunk. So basically, your average tree, it's got its trunk up the middle, and then it has the branches out from the sides. And I'm not going to do any more than that for that tree. I'm going to move along a little bit, and we've got that next tree. And all I'm going to do is just a bit of a scribble. Now, why am I scribbling? Why am I not trying to at least make something of that tree? And it's very simple. It's because when I paint it, if I draw something intricate, I'm going to paint something intricate with my brush. So I'll get my brush and I'll be carefully working around everything. And that is too much. It tends to lead to a lack of randomness, and we need to get this nice random edge to a tree to make it look like trees. So a little bit of a scribble there. We've got some smaller shrubs down here. So again, a little bit of a scribble there. And that's the drawing done, such as it is. So there's really not very much there. I think with painting trees, it must come with the painting. If you try to do too much at the drawing stage, there's just too much. So we'll get started with some paint. I always do a preliminary wash. The paper's dry, it's angled at about 40 degrees, and I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to work down to the bottom. And really what I'm doing is painting my light. Really not much more than that. So I'm not painting water. I suppose I am painting sky. I'm not painting a distant headland. I'm not painting trees. I'm just painting light. So therefore it's going to be comparatively light. And we'll get a little bit of blue in the sky. A little bit of cobalt is always a very convenient color for sky. As I say, it's not that important. I want to get onto the trees quite quickly. Start at the top, work down, use as few brush strokes as possible, and keep your brush wet. So that means dip, stroke, dip, stroke. So the brush is always wet. The proof of the brush being wet is that line of a little pool of paint. And that is my reservoir, because I can then take that and basically let it flow down for the next layer. Anyway, well, that'll do for that. We'll get a little bit of burnt sienna in there, touch too much, a little bit of, there we go. I want a sort of grayish color. It's not the brightest of days in this one, so we'll just get a little bit of color there. That comes down to here. We've got some light water, so I think I'll maybe just leave the water white paper. I don't normally do this, but we don't have a huge amount of time, and I think it's probably better just to do that. Now I've painted over my My water line, my horizon is there. So I've painted over that a bit. So as it happens, I can quickly show you a little tip to retrieve that water line. Take your paper, that's just kitchen roll, kitchen tissue, and just put it over there, give it a good squeeze, and lo and behold, that will essentially give you back your light that you may have lost. And then down a little bit, and we're on to the foreground. So I'm adding a little bit of quinacridone gold into that grayish mixture. Notice that I'm really just adapting that first mixture, that first mix that I made. I tend to do that. I tend to just keep adding different paint to it. Now, in theory, that shouldn't work because, of course, you'll probably have read or heard that the more paint you have in a mix, the muddier it's going to be. Well, I can confidently tell you that is absolute nonsense. You can put as many colors as you wish, and so long as you apply the paint simply, you will get a clean wash. Now, if you've got lots of paint in it, of course, it'll probably be quite a grayish wash, but it will be a clean wash. And that's it. That's it for the first wash. I'm going to take, I have a brush here that I call my lifting out brush. And it's just it's an old sable brush. If I'm going to be lifting out or scrubbing out, there's no point using a good brush and risking destroying the point of it. So instead, I just use this little old brush, and this takes the paint off very successfully. And the reason I'm doing this is that if I didn't do that, these little drips would run back and would create, as they're called, runbacks or cauliflowers. And so we'll get rid of all that excess. Now I'm going to just quickly dry that. So apologies, this will be slightly noisy. I've got my hair dryer here, but a couple of seconds should do this. That's close enough. It isn't completely dry, but it doesn't really need to be. So what I want to do is just reinstate that background hill. And I've got my green here, but I want to take it back down slightly more bluish. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the cobalt to it. So as you can see, I'm just really adjusting this single mix. I've changed the brush now. This is a size 14, and this one is by Rosemary & Co. It's the series 402, which has got a lovely tapered point. You can see the beautiful point on it. And I'm just going to get that little background hill again. Bring it down. Now I can vary that. While that's still wet, I can change that. I can, add a couple of little suggestions of fields and things. So the little angled hedgerows between the fields can help to very simply suggest that. I don't want to do too much, as I say, because I want to get on to the trees. So I'll quickly dry that again. And I think that's good to go for the conifers. Now, when we're looking at trees, so if I get the picture of the trees back up, and you can see the trees on the distant shore. Now, some of them are conifers, some of them are not, but for simplicity, I'm going to make them all conifers. And I'm going to ask you a very simple question. How many trees are there? And I would hope that you'll be thinking, how am I supposed to count those? I don't know how many trees are there.
But I was just starting to count them.
Yeah. The problem, of course, is that you can't count trees when they're in a big group like that. So if you can't count the trees when you're looking at them, make sure you're not able to count them when you've painted them. So you should have a group of trees, not a number of individual trees. That's the important thing. So back to these trees. As I say, we'll do these as conifers. So I'll get this a little bit darker. The conifers are always, they're quite a bluish green anyway, which suits very well because we want to keep them on that far shore. Now, what shape is a conifer? Well, it's basically a triangle or an old, Christmas tree shape, that type of thing. But you must be careful. If you try to paint your trees just with that very simplistic shape, the danger is that you produce lots of little triangles instead of lots of little trees. And the thing is that every tree is going to be different. So what I do for conifers, and it's a very simple thing, just take the very tip of my brush, and I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to work down. I'm just going to do just little side by side marks, and then I'll move over a little bit. Same thing. I'm just going to keep doing this, let things all blend together. Now, I'm very well aware that there are lots of different conifers and some have different branch shapes and things like that. But again, just for simplicity, I think we'll just stick to this one. Now, if I keep that coming across, I'm sort of conscious that I need to keep moving. Notice I'm changing the height slightly, some taller than others, but trying to get that little sort of broken edge. And in fact, if I do any that are too much like Christmas trees, I will change them straight away.
So a few questions for you while you're doing that. So Ali said, do you stretch your paper before painting?
No, I don't. Stretching paper and it needs the investment of a lot of time and effort, I think. And very often when you stretch it, the next morning you look at it and one side of it is crept up or something like that. And I think a piece of white watercolor paper is frightening enough without making it more frightening by spending a lot of time preparing it. I don't really think it's needed. To be perfectly honest, anything, even up to half sheet with 140-pound paper, I find is perfectly okay. So yeah. So the answer is no, and that's why. And but by all means, stretch it if you wish.
And Joan said, is that a sponge you have there, Graham, next to your water pot?
It is indeed. It's a little sponge. It's called, it has a name. It's a very high absorbent sponge, but I think it's for cleaning cars or something. So it really, I mean, you could pour a glass of water in there and it would still stay on the sponge. So it's very good. It draws things up. Back on this, I just want to soften some of the edges. It is quite far away. So if I keep every edge crisp and clear, it will tend to come forward. And of course, what I want to do is make sure that it's my foreground trees that come forward, not my background trees. Now, if I soften it too much, I'll obviously lose that little conifer type shape. So I'll just soften some, and particularly down at this end, and I'll just soften that and just sort of let it disappear. And you always must remember when you're dealing with backgrounds, well, for a start, we can vary the background a little bit. So this is still wet. So long as this is still wet, I can always drop other colors into it. So there's some cobalt, for example. So long as it's wet, that's when you can play, if that's the right word, you can play with your paint. Once it starts to dry, leave it alone, because that is when your paint is at its most vulnerable, and that's when you will cause major problems with it. And again, in the background, I don't want to do too much in the way of variety, but it can be done. But at this stage, when the paint is vulnerable, touch it basically as little as possible. And remember that when you're working at this, you might be feeling, well, that doesn't look very much like trees. You know, I feel I need to do more. I feel I need to put a few birds in the branches or a few needles on the ends of the branches. But if you do that, you just simply draw the eye towards it. Instead, for these background areas, we want to keep them in the background. So try and remember that these are going to be covered by the foreground trees. Notice I haven't left any space. I'll explain why in a minute. Well, A, it makes it more difficult if you're having to paint around things. B, it's really often quite difficult to fill in the empty space. So again, a couple of seconds just to dry that.
While Graham's doing that, a couple more shout outs. So Christelle from snowy Ottawa in Ontario. Hello. Carol from wet and miserable Northern Ireland. Hello, Carol.
I think I might know Carol.
And Linda sitting outside on her now I don't know quite what this is, but a lanai or lanai in Largo, Florida. I would imagine it's like a deck or something. I would imagine.
Oh,
Chidanand from Bangalore in India. Hello, Chidanand. Hyan from Bahrain. Hello. Sorry, I'll hand back to you, Graham. Sorry, I was just taking an opportunity while you were drawing.
No problem, John. So the next stage really is we come forward. So we've got our background and we come forward to the next layer of trees. And again, if we go back to the image, what I would like you to do is sort of start at the left-hand side and see if you can go right round any of these trees and meet the line at the other side. So what I'm trying to suggest is, I'm asking you, is there a hard line around the entire tree? And well, I know the answer, and we don't really have time for you to all do this, but the answer is no, there isn't a hard line. There are hard lines at the top of the tree where it's against the sky, but you can see where the tree comes down into where it's meeting the land, that it just tends to blend with the next tree or with the grass or with whatever it happens to be. And this is another key to making sure that your trees look realistic. They must not be literally cutouts. You must make sure that you connect your trees at least to the ground and ideally to the trees that are on either side. So we'll get started with the trees. And there we go. So foreground trees, these need to be a little bit more detailed, and I'll be covering this a lot more in the main workshop, but we can sort of do a little bit at the minute. These trees have got to be more interesting than the background trees. So that means more variety of color and more variety of tone. Now I'm going to make them, the one on the left is sort of quite a winter tree, but I want to make it slightly with a little bit of the autumn color still in it. So I'm going to use some burnt sienna for this. And I always start my trees at the top and work down. That might seem a bit strange, but the reason for doing that is that if you start at the bottom and work up, as you paint up, all the paint will run down and run down your trunk and probably run down your paper. So by starting at the top, working down, you can control that much more. Now, to get the idea of these little branches that there are, these little twigs at the very end of the tree, I'm just going to use the edge. This is a small size 4 brush. And I'm holding it almost parallel, literally it's resting on the paper. And if I look at my pencil, hopefully you can still see the pencil, the trunk goes up here and the branches come out like this. So I'm going to use that shape, that motion, to try to get me some broken lines. So using the side of the brush is not made to release paint from the side, so it doesn't do it very well. So you get this nice broken effect, and that's ideal. Now, I don't want to do too much. If I do too much, it will dry, and then I won't be able to link my larger branches with these ones. So what I want to be able to do, and I'll switch to this one, which should let you see a little bit better, is just use, this is a sword liner brush, and the sword liner brush allows me to create these lovely little sort of almost jerky lines. There we go, that's better. Okay, and when I've done what I feel is enough, then I go back to my other brush, and we'll take remember the motion this way. Always have to be working in the way that the tree grows. Now, what I'm trying to do is I don't want my tree to look like a lollipop. So I'm trying to make sure that my edge, such as it is very convoluted in and out. Now, if I get that a little bit darker, I can
a couple of other questions,
yeah,
Graham.
sure.
So,
Yes.
does it matter if colors, this is from Karen, does it matter if colors are transparent or opaque?
It usually doesn't. People think it matters, but for most practical purposes, it doesn't. In that even if you have a literal, in fact, I'll show you the easiest way. Here I've got, I think you can see it. Yeah, this is this is actually gouache. This is Naples yellow gouache. So it's not Naples yellow watercolor, it's Naples yellow gouache, which is opaque. But if I dilute that and put it on there, maybe dilute it a little bit more, that just looks like watercolor. It still looks transparent. And the thing is that when opaque paints are diluted, they will be essentially transparent. Now, they will not be, admittedly, as transparent as transparent pigments, but to all intents and purposes, they are transparent. So my answer is no, it doesn't matter.
Great. And Linda's asked, what's your board propped up on?
Oh, it's a little, you can see the slats of it here. I think it's one of those little desk easels.
Okay.
It's actually resting. I have, the thing it's resting on is actually an old tabletop, and it also comes up and down, but it's easier for this type of filming if I have the board flat. So I've got this huge easel that angles up, but this is just a little table easel.
Pael's asked, while painting foreground trees, is your paper 100% dry?
Yes, the paper is 100% dry, because if it wasn't, the foreground tree would blend into the background trees, which I don't want to happen, because there's a big difference between foreground and background.
And Melanie's asked, for your leafy tree that you're just doing there, what color are you actually using?
For this one?
Yeah.
This one is ultramarine and burnt sienna, which gives me a variety of grays. So if I use a little bit more ultramarine in it, it's slightly bluer. But if I use more burnt sienna, it will be slightly grayer. Now, when I get down to the bottom, what I want to do here is to allow this, as I was saying, to blend in to the ground. So if I get my trunk here, maybe go back down to a slightly smaller brush. And I want to get some more little branches coming out here. If you make a mistake and you think something doesn't look particularly right, well, just cover it up. So if I do a branch that's sort of too horizontal, that's okay, cover it up. Doesn't matter. Now down at the bottom, I'm going to allow that just to blend in with whatever is there. I'm not even being specific, because it really doesn't matter. And I can always bring, I think there is another branch there, but I can bring another branch up, and I'm going to just let that blend in with that first tree. So now we've got two trees, and the second tree took about 2 seconds. And yet we see that as two trees because we can see the two trunks. Now, if I want to get a little bit of more interest on that, a little bit of variety, I can use my softening brush as a lifting out brush. If I squeeze that, let's say the light's coming from the right. There actually isn't a great deal of light on this day, but I can just lift out a little bit of light on the right, and that will give me a little bit of added interest. So now I've got two trees that now look a little bit more interesting. And it's this interest that's important. Interest in both color and tone is absolutely vital. So let's get some differences in color. Back to the greens a little bit, and we'll get a little bit of green down here. And I'm just dropping this in essentially almost randomly. There's different shrubs everywhere. So let's get a couple of shrubs. Again, look at the direction of the brush movements. You must move your brush in the direction that the actual tree is growing. That way you will get the shape of the tree reasonably quickly and simply.
Louise has asked, when you're doing the dry and detailed trees, what brushes, what size are you actually using?
For the little twigs, I'm using, this is a 1/4 inch sword liner. Sword liner is a very long brush with that sort of tapered, has a very fine point. It's very good for that. Don't worry, if you haven't got a sword liner, a rigger will do, one of these little brushes here will do. It doesn't matter that much, but the sword liner is good because it's a brush that's quite difficult to control. And that might seem bad, but actually that's good, because then it gives you these nice little random marks, which are quite good. Now, that certainly wasn't a random mark, so I'll just change that a little bit. Bring this across, Maybe go back to the bigger brush again. And we've got the bigger tree. This is the one that is covered. It's covered in ivy. You can see that huge one in the middle. I'm not really going to be worrying too much about whether it's covered in ivy or not. All I'm going to do here is just get a tree shape. Again, start at the top. I almost started at the bottom there. Start at the top. Little. So I'm using the bigger brush this time. And notice I'm using the tip of the brush and just letting the tip of the brush sort of dance over the paper. And by doing that, and I'm holding it well towards the end, if I hold it here, there's a danger I'll start drawing with the brush, and I don't want to do that. So if we hold that back a little bit, in fact, quite a bit, right back at the end, I can get this nice uneven shape. And it's the uneven edge that is so important. I do that little bit. I then get my sword liner or rigger, whatever you happen to be using. And with this, I can do some little branches in between.
Now, just to give you a little bit of a time warning, because we're probably around the halfway mark now.
Okay. Well, I'll finish this one, John, and then we can,
perfect.
We can go on. So within this now, I've got some lighter tones. I've got some darker tones. I've got some green colors. I've got some yellow in there. I've got some gray in there. So I've got quite a lot of variety. Now, what I'm going to do, if I have to stop, what I always do, or if I need to stop, or if I'm not sure what I'm going to do next, the place where I'm stopping, I will just take my brush and just soften it. And by softening it, that gives me a chance to get back in there later. And I don't have an awkward, hard edge to have to worry about there.
Yeah, that's a good little tip. Brilliant. How are you enjoying it? Is it it's a bit fascinating for me actually, because it's quite nice to have an artist. He's got loads of technology and he's got all these different buttons that can give you great new angles. So it's fantastic for me as well. So Graham's doing some of the technology for me. So it's fantastic. And if you are watching on YouTube, please do, and if you're enjoying it, please do give a thumbs up to the video. It's really great for the YouTube algorithm and it'll help more people find this class as well. As covered with you all at the beginning, this short class gives you a great flavour of what's to come in Grahame's proper online workshop. It's usually around 2 to 3 hours and he'll walk you through a complete painting step by step from start to finish. It's both an immersive and also a relaxing experience, since there's a lot more time and a lot less people. You'll also learn lots of their tips and tricks for improving your art. The price to attend is just £35. And if you book your place by the end of today, you'll receive a special invite at a later date to get 10% off Grahame's next workshop. So it's a really good opportunity to save on his next one. So Grahame, if you could kind of explain a little bit about what you intend to do. I think it's on the 1st of December, isn't it? What are you actually going to be covering?
Okay, on the 1st of December, I'm going to sort of look more deeply into this idea of trees and the landscape. Obviously, we can only cover a little bit today, but the subject is this one that I'm going to be doing. And again, this is quite near to my home, but I'm quite sure most, if not all of you, will have subjects similar to this quite close to you. Really, it's just trees, bridge, river. That's pretty much it. But what I'll really be setting out to do in the workshop will be to show you how to distinguish between those foreground trees, middle ground trees, and background trees. Because the problem is, I've been mentioning it a little bit today, if we paint all of these trees the same, the difficulty is that there is no difference between them. So we lose depth. We don't have any indication of depth. And I'm quite sure, like me, you take some what you think are going to be beautiful photographs of forest scenes. And when you look at the photograph, I was going to say when you look at the photograph when you got it back from the chemist shop, but you don't need to do that now. But when you look at the photograph, you see, oh dear, you think, oh, it's a bit disappointing. And the reason it's disappointing is that because all of the trees have blended together in the two-dimensional photograph. So what I want to show you in the workshop is how to avoid that effect and how to try to keep a three-dimensional feel to that two-dimensional painting. And we do that by treating the background, middle ground, and foreground trees in very different ways. Now, this is one, as they say, that I did earlier, and this is that subject. Now you'll see that it's not the same as the subject. You know, if you look at it, there's definitely a difference between the two. And I don't set out to copy a subject. I set out to take a subject and to paint a painting based on it. And in this one here, what I wanted to do was get a feeling for the colors of autumn. I wanted to get the idea of the trees blending together and the idea of just simpler distant trees and slightly more complex closer trees. And that's what I'll be doing. Obviously, I'll be doing the bridge as well, and I'll be doing the water. So I'll be giving you a few tips and hints about bridges and about water, getting the sparkle in the water, getting reflections in the water, and things like that. So it'll be a fairly in-depth couple of hours or so that we'll have, but the extra time gives me a lot more time to explain things in much greater detail.
Brilliant. And obviously we do encourage you to get really involved in that and ask as many questions so that you can glean as much information as possible. So I'm going to just share my screen now and show you how easy it is to book that place. So you literally visit shopkeeparty.com. You click on Arty classes, which are in the menu, scroll down, and it shows you all the up and coming Arty classes and workshops that are coming up. You'll see Grahame's one here on the 1st of December. It's at 3:30 UK time. Click details. It then goes through to the explanation of what he's going to be covering. It's also got the sample photos, and you'll be sent these the day before along with the link if you sign up. You click on this link here and it will go through to Grahame's shop, and you can order the webinar there. And you can also order or pre-order the video, so that if you can't make the date for whatever reason, you can order the video as well. And the video has two prices: one if you're not attending the webinar, but one with a discount, big discount, if you are attending the live webinar, so that you can save there, so you can get both things. So hopefully that helps. So let's get back to Grahame and see how we do on the next half of this Arty class.
Okay, so we've got our background trees done. We've got these foreground trees started. I mentioned I'd softened that part here, which allows me then just to simply continue where I left off without having to worry about hard edges, because of course, because watercolor is a transparent medium, then if you paint over a hard edge, unless you're painting over it with a very dark tone, you will tend to see the hard edge through it. And I wanted to avoid that. So I'm just going to bring, this is actually still quite wet. This is how wet I paint. That's still wet, so I can blend into there. This is still, lots of this is still wet. Please, please try. If you don't normally paint wet, please try. People think, oh, but if I paint wet, I'll not be in control. It'll run everywhere. Well, as you can see, it doesn't. But what the wet brush does is it gives you a beautifully clean and clear wash. And that's what watercolor is all about: clean, clear washes. Okay, on we go. A little bit more, some more hints about maybe a couple of shrubs. You can be so random about these things. What will immediately make things look unrealistic is not splashing paint on. It's when you're trying too hard, and really it's much better to do this. Even if you're wanting to show some leaves, maybe by splatter, you can do that as well. And splatter is good because splatter can give you, wow, that's going everywhere. Maybe that's the wrong brush. Let's try it again. There we go. That's better. Splatter will give you these little dots and dashes that will help to suggest the all the things in a tree. It'll help to suggest the leaves. It'll help to suggest bunches of leaves. It'll help to suggest all of that. So splatter's good. And the big benefit of splatter is that you don't know where it's going, as you can see. But again, up here, we can always, well, let's see. We'll get a, this is a wild Wildlands, what was it, Wildland and Wetlands Trust. So there'll be some little birds up in the sky. So there we go. We'll change those splatter dots into a couple of birds. So remember, there are never any mistakes in watercolor, merely opportunities. Bring us on across.
A couple of other questions. So Anne's asked, what brand of watercolors do you use?
Mostly Winsor & Newton. To be perfectly honest, I'm happy using any good brand. But there is a difference between a good artist quality brand and the students quality. Not a huge difference, but there is a difference. What I would say is please, the bargain packs where you get 20 watercolor tubes for the price of one. It's not a bargain. Please don't do it, because it will not help your watercolor.
Now, Galina's asked an interesting question. What time of the day do you usually prefer to paint?
That's a good question. Well, I don't know what time. Galina is in Hawaii, so I'm not sure what time it is in Hawaii. She can tell us. But I prefer, I would say, to paint in the morning, because I think I'm well rested. I'm more up for it in the morning. And if I can get in before I do all those other essential jobs that we have, like mowing the lawn and painting the ceiling and whatever, I would, so mornings would be my favorite time. But I paint at all times, obviously, but mornings would be my favorite.
So, Anne asked, do you approach all your trees in the same sort of way as you're approaching these ones, or do you use different?
I have to confess, yes, I do. I don't worry too much whether they are birches or beeches or oaks. Although in the longer workshop, I will be showing you how to do different shapes of trees that will be more akin to specific species of trees, but I don't like to go too far down that road. I sort of limit that to sort of things like textures in the bark, things like that. We don't have time for that today, but I'll definitely be going into that in the workshop.
Great.
Now, simple back here. Well, that's the majority of those trees done. So we've got some grass in the middle. So I want to get a nice tonal difference between my tree area and my grass area. So my tree area is comparatively dark. My grass area is comparatively light. It's not terribly green. So how can I get this maybe a little bit greener, but not upset the that nice counter change that I've got? Well, it's very simple. I can just, if I take my brush, give it a good rinse, go over here just with water, and then I can mix up a stronger green or more of a grassy green. Colors and greens and things, again, I'll cover this a little bit more in the longer one, because depending on the blues and the yellows that you use, you can produce either very bright greens or really quite dull greens, and both have their place. Very often I would see greens that are just much, much too bright. So if I drop that in just below where I have wet the paper, that will just gently creep up a little bit. And if I've wet it enough, it should just leave me with a nice soft edge. So then I get that lighter green coming down to a slightly darker green. And then we come back down again to this water's edge. Not that it's really that terribly important what it is. We'll get a little bit of dark for the water's edge. So again, that's the ultramarine and the burnt sienna. I'll just drop that in, maybe bring a few little bits of that out onto the water.
Pietro's asked, what about your brand of paper? Do you have a preferred brand of paper that you use?
I do. Personally, I like papers made by St. Cuthbert's Mill. That's an English paper mill. And the three papers they make, and I use all three, are Milford, which is what this one is, Saunders Waterford, which I'm sure you've all heard of. Milford's maybe a bit less well known. Saunders would be the sort of top of their range, and lovely paper. And then they do a paper called Bockingford, which is more of a budget paper, but is a very good paper. And the thing is, the three papers have slightly different properties. So I would choose a paper depending on what I'm going to be doing with it. So with this one today, because I'm doing quite a lot of this blending of color, letting basically wet and wet, the Milford is particularly nice at that. So so St. Cuthbert's Mill, but again, I would have to say, so long as you're using a good, reputable watercolor paper, you will be fine. You do not need to worry too much.
And Galina's come back again. She now knows what time of day you start painting, but now she wants to know what type of lighting you prefer, electrical lighting or daylight for painting, or does it matter?
I think it did matter at one point when we had little yellow bulbs that effectively gave out a very warm light. And certainly I remember painting with that type of lighting. And the next day looking at the painting, and it was much too, can't try to remember. Yes, it was much too warm because I'd effectively painted it slightly cooler to allow for the warm light without me realizing it. But nowadays you can get these daylight bulbs very, very easily. In fact, most of the LED bulbs would be daylight. And for instance, at the minute, I mean, I'm up in my studio here, but my window to the outside, both windows to the outside are actually, I've got the blinds down and I'm just using pure artificial light. And the thing about the artificial light, it is completely consistent, whereas of course natural light isn't. But there's nothing better than getting outside and painting. I would say that. But inside, I'm quite happy with artificial light. In fact, I would tend to use that now in the studio rather than using natural light. I don't have big windows that face north, so therefore my natural light isn't brilliant anyway in the studio. So I've just back at this, I've decided I didn't like that after I'd done it, because this looks too much like water because it's too light. So I'm just going to go back in there with a little bit of the green. Now that looks better. That's more like land. This is definitely water. This is definitely land. This is definitely water. And then down at the bottom here, we can get a little bit more. Now, when I get down to the bottom, this is where I can sort of start to be a little bit rougher with the strokes. I'll use a little bit more variety in the color. And this is just because you would expect it, because we're closer here, you're going to expect more variety. And therefore the simplest way to get that is just by dropping these strokes in. And then that just gives me a very rough, simple bottom edge to it. If I take that tip off the bottom edge,
Rebecca asked, by the way, what colors did you use for the lighter green grass?
The lighter green grass, I began with ultramarine and quinacridone gold, but I felt that was a little too much. I'll show you what I mean. If I just clean this up here. If I mix ultramarine is a blue that is biased towards red. So that means that if you mix that with a yellow that is sort of, well, the quinacridone gold is a strange yellow, but this will give it quite a dull green, really. I mean, that's not a bright green. Whereas if I used a yellow, you can see the difference between my yellows. That's an aureolin, which is a cold yellow, a bit like lemon yellow. If I mix that with my ultramarine, that will give me sort of almost a fluorescent grassy color, and it will give me a much better grassy color. If I take it to extremes, and if I use a yellow that has got a greenish bias to it, and I use a blue that has got a greenish bias to it, that would be phthalo blue, and I mix those two together, I get this horrendous green that is a beautifully pure green, but essentially completely useless for most things. And so this is what I'm saying about the type of blues and type of yellows you use. Really, really important. And I'll be going into that more in the main workshop.
Yeah, perfect. And Louise said, would raw sienna be as good as quinacridone gold?
Quinacridone gold.
Yes.
The raw sienna is a different type of yellow, but the raw sienna with ultramarine depends on the manufacturer of the paint. Raw sienna and ultramarine will give you a very usable dull green, which is great for a lot of our landscapes, because a lot of our landscapes aren't bright greens, they're quite dull. But you may find with some manufacturers that those two will give almost a gray color, in which case you would need to use a blue that is a little bit more greenish, perhaps like the phthalo. So the phthalo blue and the raw sienna should give you a nice bright green, a bit like that. And if you use a blend between the phthalo blue and the ultramarine with the raw sienna, that will give you something in between. So it's all down to experimentation. It's amazing just what that can do.
Yeah,
I think we're pretty much
we're coming up to
done
time.
here,
We're coming up to
John.
time.
And I'll just do a couple of other little.
Yeah, you can tinker. And if
Fence
anybody
posts.
wants to, we've had a few comments and I'll read through some of them, but if anybody wants to offer their thanks or anything to Grahame, then by all means type a little message now and I'll try and get around to it. Pauline Dunleavy said, "Hi, I've done 2 workshops with
Pauline.
Grahame and can only recommend him. He travelled to Kilrush and we travelled to Dunmore for a great 3-day workshop in September last. Thank you again. Everyone, don't miss this opportunity for his workshop." So there you go. That's from.
Thank you, Pauline. The fivers in the post. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. The fivers coming your way. Then we've had, it's quite a lot of comments, and we had somewhere Norma, lovely relaxed pacing and some very nice tips. It's already looking delightful. That was a while ago, but it's amazing how it comes to shape. It's incredible. Wonderful session from Bobby. Now, Bobby actually asked me about the patron thing. I had a couple of comments about that as well. We do have it starts at £5, as I said, and that gets you entry into our special arty classes on Thursdays. It also unlocks a few other things. We have Q&A sessions with our patrons and various other things where you're the first to know about lots of things and about upcoming artists that we're talking to. But there are different levels, and the next level up from that is actually £15, but that actually unlocks the video for you if you do attend a live workshop. No additional cost. So, and that's unlocked whether you decide to continue being a patron or not. So there's some really good, do read the descriptions of the different levels because they are actually really good value. So that's something that is well worth looking into. Now, so as I explained in the interlude in the middle, if you do want to attend this workshop, if you book it today via Shopkeep Arty, and I'll put the link on our panel as well, then it means then the next workshop that Grahame will do, probably early 2021, you'll qualify for a 10% discount on that. So it's well worth doing it. And that's only for orders that we receive up to today, because I know some people have booked it already. So if you enjoyed it, and I'm sure you did, Grahame and I would love to see your paintings. So there is actually a Facebook link. It's in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you visit Shopkeep Arty and go to this arty class, the link is there, or just go to Facebook and type in Shopkeep Arty and you'll find our page there and you'll see the relevant post for this arty class. Please do take a photo and share it as a post on that Facebook post. And it's great because we can all see what everybody's interpretation is. It's a really fantastic experience to see what everybody's done. And if you do like what other people have done, don't be afraid to just give them a little like or a thumbs up, because it's really nice to give other people acknowledgement. And Grahame will go and have a little look at that, and he may make a few comments, so you get your own little personal critique. I've just volunteered his time, but there you go. Hopefully he'll be okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Brilliant. Well, that'll be fantastic. So, and we do that with our workshops as well. So it's a really nice way. So do share your art online there. Then I will post that link now, and let me just have a look. I'll go back to Grahame and say some of this. So thank you for sharing. That's from Galena. Sandy Winkler, thanks so much for this very informative, fun demo. It was well worth
Sandy.
getting up at 6 a.m. in Los Angeles. Oh my goodness.
Wow. I'm honored.
Yeah. Joanna, thanks, Grahame. Your new book on 3-color painting snow scenes is great. I'm having a lot of fun painting show scenes. Is it show or snow?
Snow.
There we go.
Here somewhere.
There you go. Susan, thank you, Grahame and John. Great session. Oh, there we go. Great. I feel like we're like those TV shows where they do a little plug for their DVD or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Diane, thank you, Grahame. Fun way to start my morning. I took from you in Langro VT last year.
Yeah.
Good to be on this morning. Hi on, lovely painting. You're always so kind. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
Anne, how do you get the discount? Well, Anne, if you purchase it by the end of today, you'll get sent a special link for the next workshop. So we're not doing a discount on this one, and we're going to do it because there are a few people that had signed up for this workshop. So we feel that that's a really good way to do it for the second workshop. Wonderful session from Chidland. Thanks, Grahame, from Rachel Sanders. Lindsay, great session. Grahame is a great teacher. His books are terrific. Mary Lynn Ward, awesome. Thank you from PA in USA. Gary, as always, wonderful. See you December the 1st. Thank you for a lovely session from Wendy Crisp. Andrew Watson, thank you so much. We've had lots of, I can keep going on, but it's been lots of, it's always fantastic.
I mean, all that feedback means an awful lot, because that's the only way I have of knowing that I'm doing things right for you. So it's very, very much appreciated. Thank you all very much.
No, it's fantastic. Oh, and on YouTube, Loretta, great teacher as usual. Grahame's a wonderful tutor from Mare Magna. Roberta, good to hear some explanation of why you paint on that paper. So some lovely comments. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We're sort of out of time, but I hope you can join us on the 1st of December. If you visit shopkeeparty.com, you'll be able to find the link to go and book Grahame's workshop. So please do that. And if you do it by the end of the day, you get that extra 10% off on his next one. So thank you from me. And if you're joining me with Michael Yazovich, we're going to be doing a 2 to 3 hour workshop in about half an hour. Look forward to seeing you then. But until then, it's bye-bye from me. And obviously, thank you so much.
Yes.
Goodbye to
Thanks
Grahame.
very much, folks. Bye-bye. Keep painting. Keep your brushes wet.